try to remain positive and think about the good times and the smile on her face or her dancing, as opposed to thinking of the situation, which has put bad thoughts and bad images in my head.
There are images and thoughts that no parent should have to ever consider.
No, never.
This lonely and isolated riverbank is a place Cindy Palmer will always have an undeniable connection with. A connection she wishes she never had. It was here on the 5th of November 2015 that the body of her 12-year-old daughter, Tiahleigh, was found. The little girl, also known as Tia, had been murdered. Is there any way to describe that moment? The pain of that moment?
You know, I fell to the ground crying because I guess obviously it was my daughter and she was found washed up on a river. Like, what kind of animal leaves a little girl in a river? But the pain I felt was so bad I couldn't do anything. I couldn't do anything but cry.
This is the wretched man who first killed, then abandoned the child he promised to protect.
Do you know the area where Tia was found?
No.
Have you ever visited that area?
No, I didn't know anything about it.
No, that's fine.
Right from the start, Rick Thorburn was a heartless liar. And right from the start, his family did everything they could to keep his evil secret. His callous wife, Julene.
It's more about protecting us, our family, our lifestyle, and our upstanding in the community.
And their sons, 18-year-old Trent, who had sexually abused his foster sister, and 19-year-old Josh.
We had to keep it all a secret. We had to pretend like we didn't know anything and, pretend.
All part of the reprehensible conspiracy to save themselves.
His exact words were, "Tia is no longer with us." He said, "I hope you understand what that means." I knew what he meant, that he'd killed her.
What we had to do is he'd break that family bond.
And the covert police surveillance that revealed the Thorburn cover-up. What really went on behind closed doors?
To the outside world, it's just a normal rural property, but the reality is it's a house of horrors, what occurred here.
Tiahleigh Palmer had already experienced much torment. By the time she was 7, she was living in foster care because, as Cindy admits, she couldn't always provide her children with the happiest or safest of homes. How was it that Tiahleigh was in foster care? How did that eventuate?
Well, it wasn't... Basically, I put her there.
And why was that?
Because I was suffering through a very severe domestic violence situation. So I actually went to the department for help because, you know, I realised that one day I was just going to die and then they were just going to be left there by themselves.
For the next 4 years, Tiahleigh remained in foster care, but instead of fighting for her return, Cindy was on a path of self-destruction.
At first, I was so devastated being apart from her that I spiralled out of control into drugs and homelessness.
Cindy accepts that at that time, Tiahleigh was better off without her.
I do. I still firmly believe that the day that I went to the department asking for help, I made the right decision. It's not what I wanted, and it wasn't the outcome any of us wanted. But at the end of the day, that was, I thought, was the safer option.
It was a broken little girl who arrived on the doorstep of Rick Thorburn and his wife Julene in January 2015. The couple and their 2 teenage sons, Trent and Josh, both talented dancers, lived on an isolated, semi-rural property in Chambers Flat, south of Brisbane. The Thorburns were considered the poster family for foster care, but Cindy had misgivings from the start, including that Tiahleigh would be living with teenage boys.
No. Straight away I said no.
Did you see any evidence in those early days to make you feel that you were justified in your concerns?
The first ever time that I met Rick, the first words that came out of his mouth were about how he was in a gang when he was younger and he was running guns and prostitutes and he was proud of this.
Did you believe him? Did you think he was telling you the truth?
Whether it was true or not, it was inappropriate.
The truth is that Rick Thorburn was a monster hiding in plain sight. To the outside world, he was a likeable, easygoing bloke, a former truck driver with a love of classic cars. But in private, he was a controlling figure, feared by his family, including Tiahleigh. And Cindy believes there was more.
There was a time when her behaviour had changed towards Rick. She didn't want to be left alone with him and she started misbehaving. She was running away. She didn't want any bar of Rick. And it wasn't just that, it was the inappropriate clothes that she all of a sudden started wearing and dresses that had padded bras in them. He'd taken her to get her eyebrows waxed and, you know, things like that.
And she never said anything to you about it, though?
She never got a chance.
Coming up, Tiahleigh disappears. When police hear that a 12-year-old girl has gone missing...
You prepare for the worst.
And an elaborate family cover-up to throw off police. At the funeral, Rick Thorburn carried your daughter's casket.
I think it's disgusting.
That's next on 60 Minutes. As the Thorburn family would later tell police, Friday the 30th of October 2015 started like any other day.
They went through and they told us a routine, and it was a routine they were all comfortable with. Hopping up, having breakfast, going to the gym, getting ready, dropping Tia at school.
But it was all lies. As police would eventually discover, Tiahleigh was already dead, killed the night before by her foster father, Rick Thorburn. As part of the cover-up, Rick maintained he'd dropped Tiahleigh to school at 8:10. This CCTV footage shows he then picked up spare parts before returning home. Just before lunch, a school counsellor calls to say Tiahleigh is not at school. When police hear that a 12-year-old girl has gone missing, do you immediately think the worst?
You prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
Sadly, in this case, it was the worst.
It was. You know, it's a tragic end.
Detective Inspector Damien Hansen from Queensland Police Homicide ran the near year-long murder investigation. Was there anything unusual right at the beginning of this case in the reporting of Tiahleigh going missing?
In hindsight, yes, there was. Rick's demeanour, his behaviour, he became very emotional right from the start. He's breaking down in tears, so much so that the social worker actually had to drive him to the police station to report her missing.
What also made Rick's emotional and immediate reaction suspicious was that Tiahleigh had run away before and had always been found within a matter of hours. Tiahleigh's mum, Cindy, was hoping this time would be the same.
I was doing what I could, but it just wasn't enough. I was speaking with police. I was catching public transport to go to look for her. This time it was so dead, there was nothing. There was literally nothing.
So with that silence, what did you think was going on? Did you think you'd find her?
I don't know. I think that my heart was telling me that I had to find her and that, you know, I wanted to find her and things were going to be okay. But I think deep down I knew that something was really wrong.
Volunteers trudge through the muddy banks of the Pimpamar River, searching for answers. Anything that might explain what cost a 12-year-old girl her life.
The 5th of November 2015, 6 days after being reported missing to police, Tiahleigh's body was found here on the banks of the Pimpamar River south of Brisbane. What do you think of Rick Thorburn using a place like this to dump this poor girl?
It's total disregard. It shows what he thought of her. They dumped trash here, and that's obviously sums up what he thought of Tia.
Local fishermen found Tiahleigh, their unexpected and shocking discovery leaving them traumatised.
She was just off the bank here in the reeds, just down only in shallow water.
And what state was her body in?
She was naked apart from a pair of underwear that was partially pulled down. She was decomposed, so identification was trouble.
The worst had come to pass. Now police had to find who had done the unthinkable. So on the discovery of Tiahleigh's body, who became your immediate suspect?
Did we look at Thorburns first? Yes, we did. But you know, there are a lot of other lines of inquiries, and it was a very difficult and long investigation.
Who else did you look at?
We knew that Rick said she was dropped at school around 8:10. We spoke to and interviewed all the children at the school, and we had a number of false sightings of Tia. We canvassed then all sex offenders in the area, and we had numerous people that we looked at.
Hundreds?
Well, there were 350 sex offenders alone that we looked at.
Did you have anything to do with the death of Tiahleigh Palmer?
Absolutely not.
All right. How was her demeanour that morning?
She was on key. She was happy, you know, it's really sprightly. You know, and I was sort of pleased that she was happy that day, so I just thought, we're going to have a good day.
Rick's shameless lies here to police were nothing compared to the show he, his wife and their sons put on at Tiahleigh's funeral. They danced and they cried, a family united in grief. At the funeral, Rick Thorburn carried your daughter's casket. When you reflect on that, what do you think?
I think it's disgusting. I think it's disgusting.
And all that sobbing and the tears and the concern, the grief, what do you make of that now?
I guess it was just their way of doing what they did for the 11 months that they weren't caught, and that was to not get caught. They were acting a part. You know, he wanted to be the victim.
You think he enjoyed the attention?
He loved it. He must have. He went to great lengths to get it. Great lengths.
Coming up, an anonymous tip-off. So that was the beginning of Let's Crack This Family.
Yes, it was.
And a family crisis.
There'd been a family meeting the night before.
Leads police straight back to the Thorburns.
Just by coincidence, she goes missing the next day.
That's next on 60 Minutes. Six months into the investigation of Tiahleigh Palmer's murder, police still had no concrete leads. The Thorburn story was so unshakable, they were no longer suspects. There was no forensic evidence. Tiahleigh's body was so badly decomposed that unless they're told, police will never know how she was murdered. As for motive, there was no clue as to why this young girl had to die. That was until Crime Stoppers got a tip-off.
It was an anonymous call came through and gave us details that there was a Facebook message sent from Trent outlining a sexual activity with Tiahleigh and that there had been a family meeting the night before she disappeared.
This is the Facebook message that changed everything and forced a crisis meeting of the Thorburns. In it, Rick Thorburns' youngest son, 18-year-old Trent, confesses.
I'm in trouble and I don't know what to do.
He's had sex with 12-year-old Tiahleigh and fears she may be pregnant. Fears, too, the legal trouble he may be in.
I've never had sex before and she made me do that with her.
He goes on to tell his cousin.
I just want the kid gone and out of my life, but I know she's also a source of income for Mum and Dad as well.
The cousin advises Trent to tell his parents, which he says he'll do.
You look at the content of that Facebook message, you look at the fact there's a family meeting, and just by coincidence she goes missing the next day. Yes, it's suspicious.
So that Crime Stopper call was perhaps not a eureka moment, but the beginning of let's look at the Thorburns more closely. Let's crack this family.
Yes, it was. It was crucial.
The call to Crime Stoppers followed the explosive news that Rick Thorburn had been charged with the sexual abuse of 2 children under 12. Those charges, which are yet to be tested in court, do not relate to Tiahleigh, but rather 2 other children who attended his wife's daycare centre. That centre was run out of the family home and was allowed to operate for a further 6 months after Tiahleigh's murder.
I think it's unbelievable. I think they should have been shut down straight away.
They weren't charged at that point with anything.
They still had a child in their care who went missing, who was murdered, you know, regardless of whether it was or wasn't them. I think that they should have not been allowed to have any more children until the situation was sorted.
The image of the perfect family was falling apart. The Thorburns were now the prime suspects and under constant police surveillance.
We knew straight away that they were putting stories together and they had to stick together, and they were telling each other to stay strong.
All under the roof of this house here.
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Detective Inspector Damien Hansen says while they were very aware of the increased police pressure, the Thorburns didn't know their house was also being bugged. Every lie now on the record.
I hope you understand what that means.
For the first time, what was said can be made public. Simply, the Thorburns' candid conversations are horrifying. In their own dispassionate words, we hear how they plan to cover up a child's murder.
We will have to keep you out of this completely.
Here, Rick and Julene are schooling their sons to maintain the lie that Tiahleigh was dropped at school when in fact she was already dead.
We have to stick to the same story about her going to school the next day and whatever.
Then this. Rick tells Trent what to say to police if he's ever questioned about his sexual abuse of his 12-year-old foster sister.
She came into your room. You remember waking up? You were still drunk. You were still whatever.
Never do the recordings capture sadness for Tia or remorse for what was done to her. But they do betray the first moment when two members of the family, Julene and eldest son Josh, begin to crack.
If we have to come clean, that's just between you and I. We will have to come clean. We've got to come clean to protect you and me and Trent for the rest of it. Dad made the decision to go down that path, unfortunately, and we're going to have to live with it, if it comes to that.
Armed with these conversations and the damning Facebook message, police now had the evidence to prove the family was lying and leverage to get them to confess.
We'd put the Thorburn family before coercive hearings, and as a result of that Facebook message, we were able to prove that Julene, Trent and Josh had all lied at those hearings, committed perjury. That was crucial in our investigation because we had to get one of them, or more than one, to become Crown witnesses against Rick.
Who turned?
Julene and Josh.
I just knew that I couldn't keep doing this very much longer because it was going to catch up with me.
Police have given us special access to their interviews with Julene and Josh. Interviews that expose the pair's cowardice and reveal what happened the night Tiahleigh was killed.
Said to Rick, was Tia okay? And he said, it's all taken care of. I said, what do you mean by that? He said, don't worry, don't ask any questions, I've taken care of it.
3 hours earlier, Thursday the 29th of October 2015, and Julene shares Trent's terrible secret with Rick. He'd had sex with Tiahleigh the week before.
He was adamant about him doing jail time, that he'll go to jail for something like this. Yeah. So Rick was, extremely concerned about that. Yeah. That he can't go to jail. Just can't let it happen.
Julene then leaves. Tia is now in the house on her own with Rick.
The last time that you saw Tiahleigh Palmer alive, when was that?
In her bedroom, sitting on her bed. Okay. I said goodnight to her there.
Yep.
And expressed to her that no, she needed to stay there and put herself to sleep when she was ready, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And where was Rick?
I think he was outside the kitchen door, like waiting for me to come back outside.
Okay. Was there anyone else in the house?
Nobody else in the house, no.
And then you left?
Mm-hmm.
We believe that at that stage Rick has killed her and he's put her body out here in the shed.
Do you know how long Tiahleigh was in Rick's presence that night?
We know there's probably a period of about 3 hours that between her being dropped home here and Julene returning home and the boys returning home as well.
With no sign of Tia?
There was no sign, and Rick simply told them that Tia was gone.
Josh too breaks ranks with his father and chillingly recounts the moment he learned of Tia's death.
His exact words were, Tia is no longer with us. And also he said, I hope you understand what that means. I knew what he meant, that he'd killed her.
How was Dad's emotions at that time?
He didn't cry. He seemed quite assured and defensive of what he'd done and why he had done it. Obviously was to protect Trent.
So, Rick didn't mention to you before you went, Sharon's, that he might take this path?
No, absolutely not, no.
Yeah, okay. Because I'm just thinking about the fact that he said that, you said that he was a bit worried about what might happen to Trent.
Yeah.
So we're going from that to killing her while you're out.
Yeah. No, I would never have left the house if I thought that. I had no indication, no feeling that he would do something like that at all.
But to Cindy, Julene's account just doesn't ring true.
I believe that, Julene left Tiahleigh there to die that night, if we believe the story that they're telling. That she left to go be at her sister's house after the conversation happened about Trent sleeping with Tiahleigh. I believe she left her there to die.
During that discussion at home, did he discuss with you the intricacies of how she was killed?
No. I still don't know what happened there. I just know that he did. That he did do it. And I think he said to us that it's best we don't know how it happened, because the less we know, the less we can tell.
The instructions for the family were to carry on life as normal.
What's your view of the fact that they did?
It just shows how callous they are. They were calculating, they were callous. They did not care one bit for Tia. They were only interested in themselves and keeping that family unit together.
I just think that, if your son slept with an underage girl, then there's so many other ways to deal with it. You don't go and kill someone for it, I don't think. He could have turned him in. There had to be more going on than just what they're saying.
Coming up, Rick's fake school run.
He's said he stopped for 30, 40 seconds, he hasn't.
And the family pact is finally broken.
I see them as perpetrators.
That's next on 60 Minutes. Convincing Julene and Josh to become Crown witnesses against Rick Thorburn was a major win for Detective Inspector Damien Hansen. When you got word from the lawyers that Julene and Josh wanted to reveal what they knew about Tiahleigh's murder, what was that moment like?
It was great. We knew we had him.
But police still had to test Rick's lies, gather hard evidence against this master deceiver.
Mate, is there anything you can tell me about this matter?
Nothing at all. I dropped her off.
Rick repeatedly lied to create the impression Tiahleigh was alive the day after he murdered her. He claimed he dropped his foster daughter to school and created a fiction of her meeting a friend on her way in.
And I just had a look at the last stomach she has, and off they go.
To fool everyone, Rick even drove the school route that Friday morning. He told police he'd stopped for 30 to 40 seconds, just long enough to let Tiahleigh out of the car.
We used other vehicles as a reference point.
What Rick didn't count on was that police would go back and check his story. With the help of CCTV, they determined he did not stop at the school. He just drove by.
So we were able to show timing of his vehicle behind there.
They calculated a time difference of 6 or 7 seconds between this white van and Rick's car before and after the school drop-off zone.
Those vehicles.
There's the white van.
Yep.
And now, it's extraordinary. You can capture it, and there's the blue car.
That's his, and that's 7 seconds difference. So if he's said he stopped for 30, 40 seconds, he hasn't. We've spoken to the driver of the white van. He had no stops on that road that day.
Mm-hmm. So, lie number one. Yeah. After his fake school run and some errands, Rick returns home. As if oblivious to the atrocious crime that has been committed under their roof, Julene works in the daycare centre while Rick tinkers on his car. At 8 p.m, Rick shifts Tiahleigh's lifeless body from the shed to his car to drive her 42 kilometres away to dump her in the river. This time, he's wily enough to avoid detection, despite police collecting 50,000 hours of CCTV footage during their investigation.
He was wary of police methodologies. He left his phone at home. He took a route that didn't involve cameras. So yeah, he took all precautions to make sure he wasn't recorded coming here.
So it was very well planned, it sounds like.
There was certainly a level of planning.
Dad said also that he didn't want us home on the Friday night so that he could do what he had to do, which was hide the body.
On the Friday night?
Friday night, yep.
When Tia's body was located, do you remember where you were?
Yeah, I remember it coming on the news first thing in the morning, and I was horrified. Just went to my gut straight away. Just knew what it was. And I went into him, he was in bed. And I said, a body has been found in Pimpama River. I said, could it be it? He just said yes.
Did you ever think about how Tia died? Or the circumstances around it?
Yeah. I don't really want to know how she might have suffered or something. It's very upsetting. But no, I've no idea how she died.
That the Thorburn three of Julene, Josh and Trent seemed to so easily cover up the murder of Tiahleigh is baffling. That not one of them had the courage to come forward is shameful.
They just did as they were told by Rick. He was a controlling figure.
Is that all that it came down to? That he told them not to, so they didn't?
Yes. He's controlled all facets of their life, always has.
Through fear or through loyalty?
Fear of Rick, fear of violence. They were intent on keeping the family unit together.
Do you see them as perpetrators in this, or do you see them as victims?
I see them as perpetrators. You know, there's a little 12-year-old girl who's lost her life, and they could have come forward then straight away and been honest.
It's a judgment backed by the courts. Trent Thorburn was charged and convicted of incest, attempting to pervert the course of justice, and 2 counts of perjury, and served 16 months in jail. His older brother, Joshua, pleaded guilty to perjury and attempting to pervert the course of justice, as did their mother, Julene. They too were sent to jail. But they've all since been released to get on with their lives, including celebrating Trent's recent 21st birthday. Are there any excuses for the choices she made?
No. None.
How would you describe the role of Trent in this?
It was disgusting. You know, he came to her funeral, he danced and he hugged me and he cried. And for him to continue this on, it's just disgusting.
We were going to arrange a SeaWorld thing with her.
Yeah.
Swim with the dolphins. So.
Mate, do you think she understood what money was?
Right.
Rick Thorburn probably thought his crocodile tears had worked, for he had no idea police were coming for him. No idea his wife and son had dobbed him in.
So do you have any doubt about whether Rick killed Tia? No?
No. I don't have any doubt at all.
Rick was total shock when he was arrested, but he did take a number of pills and tried to suicide. That was his way out. I think he planned that if he was ever caught for it, he wasn't going to face the music.
And he continued to deny it, didn't he?
And to this day, I've not heard Rick Thorburn say what he did and why he did it.
On Friday, in Brisbane's Supreme Court, Rick Thorburn finally pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to life in jail.
Your conduct throughout all of the offending is made more shocking for the deliberateness of your actions and your willingness to coerce every member of your family to maintain false accounts in an effort to cover up your despicable behaviour.
But by admitting his crime, Thorburn avoids a trial and ever explaining why he did what he did to Tiahleigh.
The thing that never entered my mind was it was somebody who was entrusted with her care that would do this to her. You know, there's a lot of bad things that happen in this world, and I just didn't see it coming.
Cindy's burden is unbearable, but instead of sympathy for her dreadful loss, many continue to find fault with her as a mother, even though she has long proven her love for all her 4 children.
It had gotten to the point where, you know, I was receiving death threats because they believed that it was my fault that Tiahleigh was dead. People blamed me for her death.
And what is that like, to live with that sort of judgment?
You know what, it's hard. I try not to let it bother me, but, you know, I've worked really hard to not be that person anymore. But I guess maybe it is a little bit of guilt because obviously, you know, I was meant to be a mother and I should have made better choices. I don't know.
Do you feel like it's your fault that Tiahleigh is dead?
I didn't murder my daughter. I did everything I could to try and get her back.
You wanted her?
I did. I wanted our family to be whole again. And it just wasn't with her not there.
Have you yet come to terms with the fact that your family won't ever be whole again?
Life's hard. Extremely hard every day. It doesn't get any easier. She was amazing. There was no reason for her to die.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.